I've heard a few different times to resolve, to solve, to eradicate wasn't one of them, but that kind of is the inference. And I think that's hard for me to get to because I think that, I forget the gentleman's name that spoke during the public session, but he spoke on the gentleman Turtle that was in the newspaper that unfortunately passed away. And he says, I couldn't get him to come inside, you know? And so I think it's important to understand there's a component that just even knowing him well and having a rapport and having a relationship could not get him to come inside that day, unfortunately. And so I think it's important that we, in those conversations and in these conversations when we're debating these things, to have it steeped in reality versus saying $3 million and it's resolved. And then if that's the case, then I don't want a community member to make that suggestion. I want a council person to stand up and say, Tony's made it clear. It's 1 cent equals $1 million. I want a council person to stand up and say, I want to raise the tax rate 3 cents, and I want to take that $3 million and I want to put it towards homelessness. And then let's vote on it. Because I think it's that succinct. It could be. And that's, I think, to dodge that is to dodge reality. And ultimately, we're going to get there at some point. And so when we get there, I'll be able to make a decision. I think also, I want to point out, though, the differences in policy. When you talk about 2014, the police department had a different policy back then. I think it's just been 2016, 2015, their policy towards homelessness. And so that affects the numbers on the jail counts. And so I find it interesting that was not brought up, you know. And so I think at some point you're either given an entire picture or you're narrowing it to a narrative. And so I want to give the entire picture and let's make a decision, you know. And so that kind of resonated with me that part was left out, and that was a significant change that our police department embraced. And they came back. I mean, I think it was Chief Howell made the presentation, and I want to say, you know, round numbers, 300,000 or so a year we were paying, and they had to make a decision, and that's what they decided to do. That council at that time. So that being said, yeah, I like the path we're currently on with the program enhancing, and this is I'm not comfortable allocating staff's time. If the group, the private group wants to fundraise, wants to rework their plan, wants to put together a planning, presentation of planning to change the zoning, absolutely. They have absolutely that right, and I would absolutely hear that. My concern is when we say, staff, stop everything you're doing and work on this, because where does that end? You know, as far as projects, as far as time allocation, as far as what other things they're tasked to do. So I don't think it's a bad idea. I just don't want city staff managing it. I want those individuals that are in that board to enhance a presentation. Staff can obviously give direction, what's needed, and have them bring that forward. And then at some point, some council member is going to come. Hopefully, if it's going to be done this year, then Tony laid out the deadlines and bring that forward. Thank you.
Councilman Duff, any comment?
Not much. I think one thing we need to look at this, and this is not going to solve the problem, guys. The problem is a whole lot bigger than this. I think it is good that they're trying to work something, and I hope they can pull it off. You're talking about 35 units, and that's a start. Okay, I don't think it's any more than a start, but you know, I agree with a lot of the stuff that John Ryan and Gerard said, but you know, I wish them well on, you know, and I think the city should try what we can to help them.
So are you wanting to?
I'm not wanting to use a lot of staff.
But the question becomes, because they have a shelter work group.
Yes.
That has been, so you want them to work through that shelter work group to vet all the options, and then those recommendations be brought back to the various municipalities that are represented
Yes.
in that? Okay,
Yes.
okay. Councilmember, yeah, if you're on your second round, if you could just keep everything pretty succinct, and then I'll wrap it up, and yes, go ahead, Councilmember Briggs.
No, because first I want to thank the citizen nonprofit for this presentation, for seeing a need and in our community and stepping up, because that's a big deal. Not everybody does that. And the reality is there is a big gap. There's a big gap. There's people on the street and they do not have a place to go. But I want to take the conversation away from tents, because again, that's not the solution. And I don't think the presentation was specifically about tents. I think it was about a funding issue and a way to maybe get the project started. But honestly, if there is a way to make these permanent shelters and have a way to, they're habitable with utilities, and they can count towards our transitional percentage, and it can remove people from the streets and help set them up and get them into permanent housing, I don't see an issue with that. I think that is a win. We had a group come to us and present tiny homes for veterans, and it wasn't an issue then. The council direction was go out into the community and get support and see how it goes. Well, that project has fizzled for some reason. It may come back, but what you need is community buy-in, and I am in favor of shelter. I am tired of seeing people in need and struggling, and they have nowhere to go. And if there is something the city can do to fix that, then I am in support of it. That's where I stand. And, it's not going to solve the problem, but it's a piece. It's a piece of the puzzle. It's a start. And if you can get habitable shelters, and you can take this group and they are willing to take this project on as a partnership, then I am for that, because it's the only solution that's been brought to us lately.
Councilmember Meltzer.
I echo Councilmember Briggs' reinforcement of the fact that what they showed us was not actually tents. It was like tents, but then other more sort of working toward other more durable structures. So, I think that's a kind of mistaken notion. I would suggest that we go down a couple of paths. Obviously, this shelter work task force, I might be using the wrong 4 words. What is it called? Shelter something?
Shelter Planning Work Group.
Shelter Planning Work Group, okay. Can take this into account and kind of look at the whole basket of options. But I think it'd be helpful for the city to help shape up the option for consideration. And, it's just different than getting it all the way down to the last, dotting the I. In particular, this citizens group is not expert in identifying sites and knowing what all the zoning is and everything. It was just, an area, a piece of land that they saw. If in fact this particular site is problematic because it's next to housing and so on, I think they would welcome assistance in looking at the, I don't know, what is it, 100 parcels that the city owns here and there, to see if there's a more suitable site that doesn't create the problems that other council members have identified. Ideally, it shouldn't, I would suggest, shouldn't be near retail, ideally shouldn't be near established neighborhoods, should be on a bus line so that folks can get to essential services. I think that's something staff ought to be able to help with.
Yes, and then I'm going to wrap it up.
So in terms of direction, I second the direction given by council members Briggs and Meltzer. I had a question for Danny to clear up a difference of what seems to me to be kind of a difference of opinion on a certain issue. And that's, if you could go back to that first slide about there we go, about the coordinated entry system. So I'm hearing some people say that an option like this, what we're giving direction on, and what I'm giving direction for, to say, let's go ahead and work with this group and see what they come up with, without putting, because we're not giving direction on put this amount of money on the table or promise this amount of money. It's just kind of let's look at this. This, as you said, falls under the street outreach category as you see it. Now, in the Federal Housing First model, right, which this is adapted from, and which Denton Housing Coalition has taken on, and rightly so, it's an awesome model. The street outreach stage, is that the answer to itself, the answer to making homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring? My sense is no, and it's not, and that's not what it's supposed to do.
So street outreach is one part of the equation, because much of what the work that has to happen has to be through the engagement of people who are living on the street. So to even get them to a point of having conversations with the people who are trying to provide assistance or refer them to assistance. So street outreach is part of the solution. Mm-hmm. It is not a housing solution.
Yeah, exactly. And so I just want to reiterate, those, and I hope people are listening, people who feel that this is not, that what's being proposed today is not a solution. I am completely agree with you. It's not a solution to homelessness, but it is a crucial, it falls into a category that's a crucial part of the process that leads to a solution. And that right now, our options at the level of, street outreach, we've got people in the street, and we've got people being arrested for sleeping on the street, sleeping on a bench. So at some point, we've got to address that too, that's happening, and that costs money too. And we're not filling this essential block in the building blocks towards a solution. So I just want to make sure that people understand that nobody's saying, and I don't think that the group proposing this is saying this is the solution, but it is something, it's a small thing that would help. So thank you.
Okay, just to clarify direction before I make my comments. My direction is move this discussion to the shelter planning work group, vet it through that organization, regional organization of experts that have been doing this for a long time, a lot longer than 4 or 5 years, and we'll see what comes out of it. I'm hearing that's your direction, Councilmember Duff. I'm hearing that's your direction, Councilmember Hudspeth. That's my direction. It's your direction. I'm assuming it sounds like you sort of have a dual direction. You have a dual direction, and I'm not sure where you are. So, but we got 4 already, so I think we're going to move it to there. But I think this conversation has been very indicative of the whole difficulty and challenge of this problem. I'm going to tell you why. Number one, we started out talking about, it's been presented as tents. We've heard people advocate for tent cities, tents encampments, city-sanctioned tent encampments. Now we had a presentation about sheds that were based upon maybe recycled material, porta potties, common kitchen area, maybe, I don't know about laundry and showering, all that, but they certainly weren't. Then I hear you talk about, and rightly so, Councilmember Briggs, that maybe tents aren't it, but something that will suffice and define and be able to be defined as transitional housing. Well, folks, we've just changed the whole course, that changed the whole course of the conversation. Transitional housing is not a structure with no utilities. It's not a structure that you go out and use a porta potty. It's not a structure, that's not what would meet our goal. So I am all for finding a way to continue on this journey that wasn't begun in 2015 or 14, but that was begun a long time ago. And yes, the circumstances may be horrible and we could be doing more, but I can tell you right now, when I look at that list, holy cow, I was reminded that 4 years ago, none of that existed. And so let's take out the bureaucratic part. Let's take out the bureaucratic part. We got 90 additional beds, 90 additional shelters with utilities, safety from the elements that we didn't have 3 years ago. That was done by a nonprofit that's been around for 10 or 15 or 20 years and raised their own funds. I appreciate people coming and making presentations and coming up with some good creative solutions. And I'm glad that they agreed to be part of the shelter group, because anecdotally I've heard that that some in this group had said they didn't want to work with the homelessness leadership team. And I'm glad to hear that because this is the infrastructure that has allowed us, and this isn't me, this is everybody in this room who's been working on this for 10 years. So I think that's the best place for this, because I'm going to tell you, I cannot get on board with putting people in tents in an area that you say is a communal neighborhood that is self-governed and all those kind of things. I'm sorry. I don't think that solves the problem. And it is horrible that people are living the way they are. And 3 years ago, 90 people were living that same way. And so I feel very confident that as we move forward and as we enlist our regional partners, and as we enlist those that have been working on this for a long, let's don't forget, it's not up there. We have 20 veterans vouchers. So my concern with this isn't the concept in the sense of the general concept. How do we continue on this path and do more within the confines of our resources as a city, but also in our help as a region? No matter what comes out of it, whoever is governing whatever recommendation is put forth, it's going to be important that we have an understanding of who they are. You know, what's the track record? What are they bringing to the table? And I want to go back to this data, because this is like the OCI to me, where we say we're saving $3 million if we find a way to get all these people into a something. I don't think a tent is it. I don't think a tent, or even a structure that's basically what I've seen described and what I've seen pictures of. I mean, it's better than nothing. There's no question about it. I will certainly admit that. But that doesn't move us anywhere towards our long-term goal. Because my question is, what's the exit strategy? I mean, when I hear that they don't care about, that there wasn't any thought about HMIS or case management services, I'm like, well, wait a minute. Isn't that the whole goal, is to help people find a way to have shelter, whether it's emergency or transitional or permanent? But we've given them now shelter. How can we help them improve the other areas of their life? So I get concerned when I hear, oh, it's just going to be a bunch of people together and there's not going to be really any kind of structure around it. But I want to go back to those numbers. Those numbers are very interesting, and I would have to really see the data on those numbers. Number one, that's not all the city's numbers. That's the hospitals, that's the county, that's all kinds of other social services that are involved. So that's not the city's number. So it's not like the city is spending an additional $3 million. And I would really want to means test that data, because anyway. So I am all for any option being on the table in the shelter work group, because I trust the deliberation of the shelter work group and the people who have helped make this list a reality. Now, that doesn't keep anybody from going out and looking and moving in programs and adopting programs that they're adopting on their own. Doesn't preclude anybody from doing that. But what is being asked of us, and I think the paper said it best in the article that appeared, it said that the group is asking the city of Denton to go alone outside of the partnership that it has built with the city, with the United Way and the Denton County Homelessness Leadership Team. Now I'm paraphrasing that, but that we've created an infrastructure. I have a lot of faith and confidence in that infrastructure. I have a lot of faith and confidence in looking at this list. And can we do better? Of course we can do better. We can always do better. We always strive to do better. But better is a relative term. And to me, better is continuing to try to meet these goals. And how can we create more emergency shelter space that is truly shelter space within the limitation of all the resources we have. And there may be some people out there who have a building we don't even know about. There may be somebody out there that has a building that would be willing to donate it or do something like that. In this group, we could help facilitate this group beginning to facilitate that. There's all kinds of possibilities. But I do not believe it's the city's unilateral duty to solve this problem because, number one, we don't have the resources. And the conversation in and of itself, did you notice how it sort of changed during the course of the discussion? And that's the difficulty. It's certainly the difficulty with me trying to figure all this out. And that's why I think these people who have this. So as far as this dual capacity, I think that the city of Denton can provide through its staff member on that group the necessary resources that would be required from the city. But folks, this doesn't have to be in the city of Denton. It could be somewhere else. It could be in the city of Sanger. It could be in Louisville. It could be in Lake Dallas. It could be in the county. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities. So that's really why I'm excited about the shelter work group, because it's like, okay, let's open up the discussion out. We really solved on a very large scale very quickly when we were able to help Monsignor King get that. Yes, it was a city building. It was the old pound. It was the old animal shelter. And it's really just sort of, I mean, you heard all kinds of comments about that. But look, I hope everybody at this table has had a chance to tour that facility. It's amazing. So I hear the direction, shelter work group. I know you're wanting to speak, but I really want to, because people are going to start making comments. I've waited intentionally just because I'm not going to try to convince anybody. I'm just saying what my thoughts are, and that I believe we have a great opportunity here to work with the group that brought this to us initially, to get them involved in the process, and that we have people who are dedicated to that to make it work. I just look at that list of accomplishments, and I feel very confident that, and we visited Austin, and I can tell you when I left that meeting with Austin, who's been doing this for a long time, my first thought was, wow, we're further along than what I thought we were for just the short amount of time that we've been doing this on a collaborative basis. So that seems to be the direction. That is a very robust schedule. I get a little concerned about that because I want to make sure that we do things correctly and succinctly, and so I can appreciate that. But I just, those are my thoughts. I trust you guys to do that, you all to do that, and I don't have an issue if we can find people who are homeless to be a part of that. We've had those. Unfortunately, Councilmember Armature, the challenge in the past is we've formed those work groups before with demographics to try to help us, and we did it at the Denton County Homelessness Leadership Team, and I don't think I'm not sure if we even had that many meetings, but sometimes it just gets difficult. I don't know why, but I certainly support that, and certainly would support anything that we can do to help inject that population into the discussion, because I think that's important.